Vanessa from CraftyGemini.com, and I post weekly crafting and cooking videos here on YouTube. This week I'm back with block number 9 of our video quilt along. I'm going to walk you guys through step by step on how to make the X block. I bet you're going to be surprised to see how easy it is to make this block. So let's start with the supplies we'll need and jump right into making block number 9. So we take our main square here and we're just going to cut a line along the diagonal. Notice my ruler that I have here is 14 inches long and it's just too short. Instead of bumping up 2 rulers, I recommend you find yourself some kind of a straight edge that's longer than the diagonal, so you don't have to be moving rulers around and you can cut one straight line on that straight edge there. We're going to separate these out and take one of our contrasting strips of fabric, and we're actually going to sew it in between there. So you want to lay the strip pretty side facing down and just make sure that your strip is longer by a little bit. I have about an inch or so on each end of the diagonal. So we're going to lay it here with the pretty sides touching, matching up that inner raw edge. One thing I want to tell you is that since you cut on the diagonal, this is now on the bias. So you don't want to tug or stretch or pull here because it will distort the piece. So I recommend you use starch when you're pressing your pieces. It just helps keep everything a little bit crisper. And so just lay it right on top there carefully. Place some pins. And we're going to sew down all the way with our scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Notice where I sewed here, I didn't stop right at the edge. Just keep sewing a little bit past that because you'll trim that down later. You just want to make sure that you have that corner stitched down. When that's all done, you're going to then open up the strip of fabric here and you're going to take it to your ironing board and press it so that the seam is headed towards the darker fabric or the outside fabric. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. And now, so we know where to lay it, so this is going to be symmetrical. What I do here on this other tip, you don't want it to be too off. So just fold on the edge there just to make a little crease mark, letting you know where the tip of your triangle is. And then line up on the other side the same thing, pin it, and again, sew all the way down with that scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, just take it to your ironing board and press that seam out towards the outside fabric. If you want, you can leave your block like this, but if you want to turn it into an X, you can just turn it on a diagonal. And then we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to slash it like we did earlier across the other diagonal. And that's going to give us an X after we sew in our strip in between the 2 triangles. So just layer your ruler up. Again, cut it right down that center diagonal. Separate your pieces and insert another one of your contrasting strips of fabric. Pin it and sew it down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Press your seam allowances out towards the outer fabric. And then you're going to sew it right back there. What you want to make note of here is that you want where that X crosses, you want it to be as lined up as you can get it. So what I like to do is kind of just measure it there, turn it over, and then flip it back and double check that your strip is going evenly all the way across the block. Then place a pin there, and then you can go back and continue pinning the rest of the edge. After you press that seam as well, you end up with a nice X block, and you're going to trim it down. This is a 9.5 inch square ruler, so if I wanted to trim it down to that size, I would just line up this 45-degree angle that I have on the ruler down the center of one of those crisscross strips. But since I actually need a 12.5 inch block for this quilt along, I'm going to fold it down the middle and crease it. And then I'm going to open it and do the same thing on the other side so that I end up with a nice cross, letting me know where the center mark is on both sides of my block. This is important so that we can trim it so that the X is still in the center. We don't want to trim too much off of one side or the other if we want the X to be symmetrical. So from the center mark to the edge, I need 6 1/4, right? Because that's half of the 12.5 inches that I need. So I'll put my 6 1/4 inch mark on that center crease line, line up the bottom edge of my ruler with the fold, and then just slice off the excess. Then I'm going to turn it over because I'm right-handed, so I can do the same thing to the other edge. You always want to cut parallel sides. If I cut the one on the left, then I want to cut the side on the right. Again, lay the 6 1/4 inch mark on the ruler on the center mark, that center crease mark I made in the center of the block, and then trim off the excess. So now I know that from edge to edge here, you should double check it and make sure it's the 12.5 inches that I need. Now we're just going to repeat the same process to the other side. So I cut that one, then I cut the one on the right. Now we're going to open it and turn it, okay? Turn it this way and then fold it back down that other center crease that I made. And we're going to repeat the same thing. 6 1/4 should go in the center crease. Line up the bottom edge of the ruler with the fold and then slice off the excess. Flip it over and repeat the process. And after you double check your measurements, you should end up with a perfect 12.5 inch square quilt block. Now that we're done with block number 9, guys, you can set this one aside. You actually don't have to go ahead and trim it down to size like I showed you in this video, because after we're done with the 12 blocks, I'm going to teach you in another tutorial how to square up your blocks and make sure that they're all the same size before we start putting them together to make our quilt top. Hope you guys enjoyed that fun tutorial, and remember to upload those pictures to our Facebook page. I love to see what you're making from the Crafty Gemini tutorials. And see you guys in 2 more weeks when I'm back with block number 10. We're almost done.